You have been told 7 to 8 hours. That number has been in your head for years. You track it, roughly, consciously. You calculate it when you go to bed. You check it when you wake. Some nights you achieve it. Many nights you do not. And on the nights when the mathematics work out, on the nights when you stayed in bed long enough and the hours are there, you wake up and the restoration you were supposed to feel is not proportional to the time you spent unconscious. 7 hours, not enough. 8 hours, also not enough. Nobody has explained why the number, so carefully attended to, keeps failing to produce what it promises. The reason is that 7 to 8 hours is the right answer to the wrong question. Duration is not the primary variable in sleep quality after 60. Timing is. And the shift in timing that happens to the biological clock after 60, specific, measurable, and almost never discussed in a clinical appointment, explains not just why the hours fail to deliver what they should, but why the most commonly prescribed treatment for that failure may be making the underlying problem worse. At around the 9-minute mark, I am going to show you something about the class of sleep medication that millions of adults over 60 are currently taking. What the research shows about what those medications do to the specific biological architecture of sleep. Not the duration, not the ease of falling asleep, but the depth and structure of what is happening inside the brain during those hours is something that changes the conversation you need to have at your next appointment. Stay with me for that. It is the most practically consequential thing I will tell you in this video. I have spent more than 3 decades in geriatric medicine, and the single most consistent source of preventable sleep suffering I encounter in adults over 60 is not insomnia. It is the mismatch between when they are sleeping and when their biology needs them to sleep. That mismatch has a name, circadian misalignment, and it has a specific mechanism in the aging brain. And it is responsible for a quality of sleep deficit that no amount of additional hours in bed will correct, because the problem is not in the hours, it is in the timing. Let me give you the mechanism, and let me start with an image that will make every part of this video easier to hold together. Think of the restorative capacity of sleep as a tidal window. The tide pulls back once every 24 hours, exposing a specific stretch of shore. On that exposed shore, and only on that exposed shore, certain processes that cannot happen when the tide is in can finally run. The brain clears its accumulated metabolic waste through the lymphatic system. The body releases the majority of its daily growth hormone in concentrated pulses. The immune system redistributes and replenishes its surveillance cells. The deep neural repair that consolidates memory, rebuilds cellular integrity, and maintains the connections that sustain cognitive function. All of this happens on the exposed shore. All of it requires the tide to be out. After 60, that tidal window shifts. The biological clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus at the center of the brain, undergoes a change called circadian phase advancement. The window that once opened at 10 or 11 in the evening and closed at 6 or 7 in the morning now opens at 8:30 or 9 and closes at 4:30 or 5. The tidal retreat is the same length. The same shore is exposed. But it is exposed at a different time. Earlier, progressively, year by year after 60. The problem is not the shift. The problem is that everything else in a person's life, the social schedule, the family rhythm, the habitual bedtime, the sense of what is a reasonable hour to be awake, does not shift with it. The senior goes to bed at 10:30, at 11, because that is when sensible adults go to bed. They lie there for 45 minutes before sleep comes. They wake at 4:30 or 5 because that is when their biology says the tide is in again. They are told this is insomnia. They are told they need more hours, but they do not need more hours in the water. They need to be on the shore when the tide is out. Here is what the difference between circadian-aligned sleep and circadian misaligned sleep looks like in 3 specific biological processes. And I want you to notice that these 3 processes correspond precisely to the symptoms that most adults over 60 associate with poor sleep: cognitive fog, physical recovery failure, and the nagging sense that rest is no longer doing what rest is supposed to do. The first is slow-wave sleep. Slow-wave sleep, stage 3, the deepest stage, is not distributed evenly across the night. It concentrates in the first third of the sleep period, particularly in the first 90 minutes after sleep onset. It is during slow-wave sleep that the lymphatic system operates at full capacity, flushing metabolic waste from the brain including the proteins associated with neurodegenerative processes. It is during slow-wave sleep that cellular repair genes are most actively expressed. It is during slow-wave sleep that the immune maintenance cycle runs its most intensive phase. Here is what circadian misalignment does to this architecture. When sleep onset occurs outside the biological window, when the tide, so to speak, is no longer fully out, the slow-wave stage is suppressed. Not eliminated, but measurably reduced in depth and duration. The body attempts to enter slow-wave sleep, but the circadian signals that drive the deepest descent into it, the coordinated temperature drop, the melatonin peak, the adenosine load, are not at their peak because the window has passed. The senior who goes to bed at 10:30 when their biological window opened at 8:30 is entering sleep 90 minutes after the conditions that drive the deepest slow-wave descent were at their most favorable. This is why the hours can be there and the restoration cannot. The shore was exposed, but you arrived after the tide had already begun to return. After 60, slow-wave sleep is already reduced by the natural decline in SCN cell density. The biological clock has less power to drive the deep descent than it did at 45. Circadian misalignment compounds this reduction. The two deficits do not add, they multiply. And the cognitive fog, the physical heaviness in the morning, the sense of having rested without having recovered. These are the direct consequences of slow-wave deprivation, occurring in a brain that was already fighting to access it. Here is what that costs in a way that goes beyond the morning feeling. The second process is growth hormone release. Growth hormone, HGH, is the body's primary signal for cellular repair, muscle protein synthesis, fat metabolism, and tissue maintenance. In adults, the majority of daily growth hormone is released not continuously, but in concentrated pulses. And those pulses are almost entirely tied to the first and deepest slow-wave sleep cycle of the night. Not to sleep in general, to the first slow-wave cycle specifically. In a younger adult, this first slow-wave cycle occurs within 40 to 60 minutes of sleep onset. The growth hormone pulse that accompanies it is the largest hormonal event of the 24-hour cycle, more significant in magnitude than any pulse during waking hours. After 60, two changes occur simultaneously. Growth hormone production naturally declines with age, and the first slow-wave cycle is both delayed and shallower than it was, producing a smaller stimulus for growth hormone release even when it does occur. When circadian misalignment delays sleep onset relative to the biological window, the first slow-wave cycle is pushed further back, made shallower, and the growth hormone pulse associated with it is diminished in magnitude. The repair signal that should be the centerpiece of the overnight maintenance program is being sent quietly, late, and at reduced volume. This is why physical recovery from exertion feels different after 60 than it did before, not only because growth hormone production has declined, but because the delivery window for what remains is being missed, nightly, through a mismatch between the biological tidal window and the actual time you spent in bed. I want to hold the third process for a moment, because what I am about to show you at the 9-minute mark is connected to it, and it carries the most immediate clinical relevance of anything in this video. The third process is cardiovascular risk, and the specific finding that makes sleep timing, not sleep duration, the variable that matters most for heart health after 60. A study using data from the UK Biobank, 88,026 participants, followed over 7 years, examined the relationship between sleep onset timing and cardiovascular events including heart attack, heart failure, and stroke. It found that participants who fell asleep between 10 and 11 in the evening had the lowest cardiovascular event rates. Participants who fell asleep before 10 had significantly elevated risk. Participants who fell asleep after midnight had elevated risk of a different profile. The participants who fell asleep before 10 were, overwhelmingly, older adults whose circadian phase had advanced, whose tidal window had shifted earlier, who were falling asleep at their biological time, which now landed before 10 on the clock. Their sleep was biologically appropriate, but the earlier clock time at which it occurred was associated, epidemiologically, at the population level, with greater cardiovascular vulnerability. This is not a paradox if you understand what the data reflects. These are adults sleeping in their biological window but carrying the cumulative cardiovascular consequence of years of physiological disruption from circadian misalignment that preceded the phase advance and in many cases, of the treatments prescribed for the sleep complaints the misalignment produced. Now, the 9-minute mark. The treatment I have been moving toward. The class of medication most commonly prescribed to adults over 60 for the sleep problems produced by circadian misalignment is Z-drugs, zolpidem, ezopiclone, zaleplon, and benzodiazepines. These medications work through GABA receptor modulation, which produces sedation and increases total sleep time. They work in the sense that the hours increase. The patient goes to sleep faster, or stays asleep longer, or both. The metric improves. Here's what multiple polysomnographic studies, sleep architecture studies, that measure the actual brainwave patterns during sleep, show about what those medications do to slow-wave sleep. Z-drugs and benzodiazepines suppress slow-wave sleep activity, not marginally, measurably. In some studies, slow-wave sleep percentage in patients taking these medications falls from an already reduced baseline of 8 to 12% to 4 to 6%. A halving of the deepest restorative stage in exchange for an increase in lighter sleep stages that pad the total sleep time without replicating the biology of deep restoration. The medication solves the duration problem by extending the least restorative stages. The tidal window is no longer the issue. The patient is now spending more hours in the water, but the shore is less accessible than ever. The glymphatic clearance is reduced. The growth hormone pulse is further suppressed. The deep repair that was the whole point of the additional hours is happening less, not more, than before the prescription. A patient of mine, a retired architect, mid-70s, a man of precise and methodical habits, had been taking zolpidem for 18 months when I saw him. It had been prescribed because he was waking regularly at 4:30 in the morning and only accumulating 5 to 6 hours. On zolpidem, he was sleeping 7 to 7.5 hours. His GP was satisfied with the response. He was not. He woke confused in a way that had not been present before the medication. His morning blood pressure was harder to control than it had been at his previous reviews. His wife, who had been a reliable observer of his sleep for decades, said he seemed restless in ways she had not noticed before. Not awake, but churning, turning, never quite still. A sleep study arranged by a specialist showed that his slow-wave sleep percentage had fallen from 11% before medication to 5% on it. He was sleeping longer. He was sleeping far less restoratively. The medication had extended the tide's time at the shore without exposing any more of the sand. His circadian assessment showed a phase-advanced biological sleep onset of approximately 8:50 in the evening. He was going to bed at 11 each night, more than 2 hours after his biological window had opened, during which time he had been lying awake, growing frustrated, and for which the zolpidem had been prescribed. The medication addressed the symptom of the misalignment without addressing the misalignment itself. When, in close collaboration with his GP and a sleep medicine specialist, the zolpidem was gradually tapered over 12 weeks while his sleep schedule was advanced 30 minutes every 2 weeks, moving his bedtime incrementally from 11 to 8:50 over 2 months, aligned to his measured biological window. His slow-wave percentage returned to 11% within 10 weeks of alignment. His morning confusion resolved. His blood pressure readings stabilized back to their pre-prescription pattern. His wife mentioned it before he did. Same man, same bedroom, same body, same hours, actually 30 minutes fewer, different platform. The tide was out, the shore was accessible, the biology ran. Here is what I want you to take from this video into your next appointment. 3 specific steps, each one actionable without delay. The first, for the next 7 days, note the exact time you first feel genuinely sleepy in the evening, not tired from the day, but sleepy. The biological pull toward sleep that has nothing to do with effort. And note the time you wake in the morning naturally, before any alarm, if you can. Bring those 2 numbers to your GP with these exact words. I would like to discuss whether my sleep difficulties may reflect circadian phase advancement rather than insomnia. I have been tracking my biological sleep onset and natural wake time, and I would like to understand whether my current treatment is addressing the timing of my sleep or only the duration. That distinction, timing versus duration, will immediately identify whether your GP is working with the current literature on circadian sleep medicine in older adults. The second, if you are currently taking any sleep medication, a Z drug such as zolpidem or ezopiclone, or a benzodiazepine such as temazepam, ask your prescribing physician with these exact words. I have been reading about the effect of this class of medication on slow-wave sleep architecture in older adults. Can you tell me whether this medication is improving the depth and quality of my sleep, or primarily the total duration? And is there a referral to a sleep medicine specialist that might be appropriate? Do not stop sleep medication without medical supervision. The withdrawal from some of these medications requires clinical management, but this question is the one that opens the necessary conversation. The third, this week, try moving your bedtime 30 minutes earlier than your current usual time. Not because going to bed earlier is categorically better, it is not. But if your circadian phase has advanced by 90 minutes or more, a 30-minute earlier bedtime begins to move you closer to your biological window. Note whether your natural waking time shifts in response, and whether the quality of your first few hours of sleep feels different. Bring that observation to your appointment. Let me bring you back to where this began. The number, 7 to 8 hours. The metric you have been tracking, achieving on some nights and missing on others, and that has consistently failed to produce the restoration it was supposed to guarantee. The number was never wrong. The question it was answering was, duration tells you how long you spent near the shore. Timing tells you whether the tide was out when you were there. And after 60, the tide changes its schedule, it retreats earlier, it returns earlier, and the senior who continues arriving at the shore at the old time is measuring the hours they spent standing in cold water and wondering why they do not feel rested. The tidal window is still there. The shore is still there. The processes that run on that exposed shore are still available to you. What has changed is when they are accessible, and aligning your sleep to that changed window, not chasing more hours in the wrong one, is the most evidence-supported intervention available to you without a prescription. Over the next 7 days, your biological sleep onset time and your natural wake time. 2 numbers per day. Write them down. Because next week, I am going to show you what those 2 numbers reveal about your circadian phase, and what your circadian phase predicts about something the research calls your cardiovascular risk window. Not your lifetime risk, your daily risk window. The specific 90-minute period each morning when your cardiovascular system is most physiologically vulnerable, governed by the exact same circadian machinery that sets your sleep timing. And whether that window falls when you are still in bed, still asleep, or already fully awake and active has clinical implications that your cardiologist has almost certainly never calculated for you. Come back with your 2 numbers. This is the piece that makes everything else make sense. One important note before you go. Everything in this video is for educational purposes only, and is not a substitute for the advice of your personal physician. Please do not stop or taper any sleep medication, including Z drugs or benzodiazepines, without first speaking to the doctor who prescribed them. Abrupt discontinuation of some of these medications carries real medical risk and requires supervised management. The goal of this video is not to alarm you about your current treatment. It is to give you a more complete picture of the biology your sleep is navigating after $60, and the specific questions that will move your care from managing a metric to addressing a mechanism. That conversation is where the real restoration begins.